Okay, I think we could probably get going here. So I just want to first say thank you for joining us. This is our first educational program for Clean Cities, so it's really exciting to have you here. Let me get my screen going. Can everybody see my slides? Can somebody say yes, because I can't see you?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, great. So again, this is our first educational program for Clean Cities. We're going to be covering business funding opportunities for alternative fuel vehicles. A quick look at our agenda for today. I'm just going to talk really briefly about what Clean Cities is. Then next up will be Kirsten Stasio, the Executive Director for the Nevada Clean Energy Fund. She will be covering the Inflation Reduction Act and other incentives to convert your vehicles to alternative fuels. And then Adam Grant, Director of Electrification and Energy Services at NV Energy, will discuss incentives for infrastructure. So I just wanted to give a quick overview or recap for anyone who wasn't at our first meeting or just wanted to have a few reminders about what we covered. We're starting a Clean Cities Coalition in Clark County, and I am a fellow that is working on that project. What the Clean Cities Coalition is, it's a national network through the U.S. Department of Energy. The goal is to reduce petroleum fuel use, and that's mostly done through approved alternative fuels and idling reduction. The purpose, of course, is to reduce dependence on foreign oil, provide cleaner air, and lower greenhouse gas emissions. There are currently 75 coalitions in the United States, but no representation right now in Nevada. So this is a really great opportunity. And Clark County is currently working towards a designation into the Clean Cities Coalition. So why would we want to join Clean Cities? First, there are funding opportunities for coalitions and for stakeholders within the coalitions provided by the Department of Energy. Again, we would have national recognition being part of this coalition. What I think is really important is it would be a collaborative space for our community. So anyone that's interested in reducing petroleum fuels, this would be a place to learn, to find best practices from other members of your community and increase capacity building. And then, of course, cleaner air and fewer greenhouse gas emissions. So who do we consider a stakeholder for our Clean Cities? It's really anyone interested in reducing their petroleum fuel use. So it could just be an individual that just wants to learn more, but in particular, we want to work with those that have vehicle fleets who provide fuel, nonprofits that have clean air initiatives, anything like that. We would be really interested in working with you on this coalition. There are a few ways that you can participate in Clean Cities. The first is we're going to have quarterly stakeholder meetings. We had our first meeting in October, and so thanks to anyone that was able to make it out for that. We had a really great turnout. We're going to have our next meeting in January. Once we have a date settled, I'll send an email out reminding you about that, and that will be our next meeting. We are going to have online programming just like this here. This is, again, our first program, so it's really exciting, but we'll have a lot more opportunities for education in the future regarding alternative fuels. We'll host in-person events like ride and drives or other demonstrations. And then there's opportunities for your organization to sponsor, present, and host in-person events, these online programs. So there's a lot of opportunities to work together. If you want to learn more, you can scan this QR code. Our URL is a little long, so we didn't want to write it out, but you could search Clean Cities Clark County and it will come up that way as well. And you could always email me if you have any questions. Let me just stop sharing my screen. Does anyone have any questions about Clean Cities before we move on? I see Leslie's hands up.
Yes, I was just wondering if we're going to be able to get a copy of the slide decks for today.
Yeah, once we get the final slides from our presenters, we'll put that together and I will have that up on our Clean Cities website.
In addition to the one that you just had up right now.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yep. Any other questions? Okay, so I'll turn it over to Kirsten, who is going to talk a little bit more about the Nevada Clean Energy Fund.
Thanks, Nicole, and thanks for having me. And I definitely appreciate your efforts on the Clean Cities Coalition. All right, so I'm going to share my screen here. Can everyone see this okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, hi everyone. My name is Kirsten Stasio, and I'm the Executive Director of the Nevada Clean Energy Fund. I want to start by giving a little bit of background on who the Nevada Clean Energy Fund is, and I also refer to it as NCEF. Okay. So NCEF is a nonprofit organization that supports a thriving, affordable, and accessible clean energy economy. And we do this by providing financing and technical resources to Nevadans. Clean energy can mean everything from energy efficiency and electrification measures in buildings to alternative fuel vehicles and refueling or charging stations to rooftop or utility scale solar projects. And we focus on clean energy because it can help reduce energy costs, spur job growth and economic development, improve the air we breathe, and address climate change. To dig into why we're focused on clean energy a little bit more, it's because energy cost burdens can be significant for both businesses and residents. For many businesses, energy is one of the largest operating expenses between electricity and natural gas for buildings and gasoline and maintenance for fleet vehicles. And as I'm sure we're all painfully aware, energy costs have increased quite significantly in just the past year and over the past several years. But in the past year, due to global geopolitics and with little reprieve in sight in the wake of OPEC production cuts to oil announced last month. But the reason why we're focused on clean energy is because those clean energy measures can really reduce those energy costs and reduce exposure to price volatility. The most cost competitive energy resources today are the cleanest: renewable energy, energy efficiency, and electric vehicles, even on an unsubsidized basis. But the challenge that we're focused on addressing is that profitable clean energy opportunities often get left on the table, either because there's a lack of awareness or technical know-how of the opportunity, or a lack of access to capital to invest in those better alternatives and realize operational savings. So this is why the Nevada Clean Energy Fund was established. NCEF is a nonprofit organization that was created by state legislation in 2017 to operate as what's called a green bank, which is an institutional model that has been successfully implemented in over a dozen other US states. You can see some of the logos from other green banks in existence on the left here. But green banks, they provide technical assistance and accessible financing for clean energy projects, with really a priority for projects that might otherwise struggle to access funding from traditional investors. And when I say accessible financing, I'm really referring to primarily the provision of low interest long-term loans. So green banks across the US, they've deployed billions of dollars over the past decade, including for clean energy projects for businesses and nonprofit organizations. And looking forward, green banks are expected to have significantly increased impact because of a provision in the Inflation Reduction Act called the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund that allocates $27 billion for green bank activities. So this is really where the Nevada Clean Energy Fund is focused on bringing these funds into Nevada and putting them to work implementing clean energy projects. But beyond the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, the Inflation Reduction Act has nearly $400 billion in incentives available for clean energy and low carbon projects in the US. including for businesses and nonprofits, to convert their fleets to alternative fuel vehicles. So for the rest of my presentation, I'm going to talk about economic and technical considerations for businesses looking to convert their fleets to run on alternative fuels. So at a high level, the term alternative fuel vehicle generally encompasses a variety of different potential fuels, including the 6 that you see here. My presentation is going to focus mostly on electric vehicles, or EVs, given the current and growing availability of EV models across different vehicle types and use cases. But I'm going to touch on some of these other alternative fuel vehicle options as well. The biggest motivator for a vehicle owner to buy an EV is typically because of the economic benefits. EVs can yield fuel cost savings of up to 80% compared to a gasoline car. The average cost per gallon equivalent for electricity in the US is less than $1.50. And Nevada's electricity costs are actually even lower than the national average. But regardless, $1.50 is significantly less than not only gasoline, but some of the other alternative fuels as well, as you can see in this this chart. And you can also see that electricity costs are much more stable than other alternatives as well. So going electric kind of reduces some exposure to fuel price volatility. EVs, they also require far less maintenance and upkeep than most car owners are used to, because there are a lot less moving parts. You don't have an engine. There's a really simplified transmission system. You've got regenerative braking, so you have to replace your brakes a lot less. But in addition to these kind of unsubsidized, compelling economics, the Inflation Reduction Act has made available anywhere from $7,500 to upwards of $100,000 in federal credits for organizations that purchase an EV and install an EV charger, which I'll talk about more in a minute. And I just want to call out that another potential motivation for buying an EV include the health, environmental, and climate benefits involved. EVs, they don't have tailpipe emissions, which means cleaner air for the communities that these vehicles are driving through, and a reduction in the associated health impacts like asthma and other respiratory and heart diseases. And from a climate standpoint, EVs also emit less than half the greenhouse gas emissions of a gas-powered car over its entire lifetime, including upstream manufacturing. And EV emissions are going to continue to decline as renewable and clean sources of electricity continue to grow in our electricity mix. So because of these economic, health, and climate benefits, we've seen EV adoption really explode in the US and worldwide in recent years. Today, EVs make up almost 6% of vehicle sales in the US and 7% globally. And forecasts from everyone from McKinsey to the International Energy Association, the IEA, to Bloomberg, even OPEC forecasts are predicting that EVs will make up over half of vehicle sales by 2030, which is really just around the corner. So this is a transition that we're seeing happen, today, right now. It's really, really exciting. And this growth, it's driven by economics, health considerations, et cetera, but it's also driven by the proliferation of EV offerings on the market, with nearly every major automaker releasing EV models and a wide range of options in terms of cost, range in terms of miles, performance, and vehicle type. So this slide, it provides a few examples of offerings on the market, broken out by vehicle type. Passenger vehicles by far have the most options on the market, including everywhere from sedans to SUVs to light duty trucks to medium and to passenger vans. But we're increasingly seeing more and more options for medium and heavy duty trucks that move cargo and freight. And beyond the kind of vehicle categories listed on this slide, there are EV options for almost every vehicle type that you can think of, including for school and transit buses, forklifts, garbage trucks, and tractors. All right, so let's take a look at some of some illustrative economics for a few of the different vehicle types. In terms of sedans, we're at a point where the suggested retail prices, the MSRPs of EVs, can be cost competitive with their gasoline counterparts. This table here shows a cost comparison of the MSRP and the annual fuel and maintenance costs of a Toyota Camry gasoline car versus a Chevy Bolt EV. And you can see the base MSRP for the Chevy Bolt is actually lower than the Camry, and the Bolt achieves annual estimated fuel and maintenance cost savings totaling over $2,000. I want to make a couple of notes here that are important to understand when thinking about the economics of an EV versus a gasoline car. Fuel and maintenance cost savings of an EV are fairly highly dependent, as you might expect, on the miles driven, where more miles means more savings. And so for these economic examples that I'm showing you, I'll show you a couple more as well. I assume just under 12,000 miles driven per year, which is equivalent to an average of 33 miles per day. And this is below the national average of a typical car. And you can imagine, you know, some of these delivery vans are going to get well above that mileage. Another thing to note is that these economics don't account for the cost of buying and installing a charger, which can range quite a bit, everywhere from $500 to up to tens of thousands of dollars plus, depending on the type of charger and the existing electrical infrastructure at the charging station. I'm going to talk more about that in a minute, as will Adam from NV Energy. And then a final note is that these economics, they don't account for federal or other subsidies, which I'll also talk about in a minute. Okay, so we talked about sedans. Let's talk about light duty trucks. With many of the light duty truck offerings, the cost of the EV is typically higher than for the gasoline counterpart. As a general rule of thumb, the heavier the EV, the more expensive it's going to be, because you need a more expensive battery that can handle that extra weight and have hauling capacity. So you can see here with the Ford F-150, the base MSRP for the EV is about $4,000 more expensive. But again, the payback from the fuel and maintenance cost savings on that additional upfront MSRP cost is less than 2 years. Okay, let's shift to talking about delivery vans. Again, you can see here with the Ford Cargo van that the electric option is more expensive, even more expensive by about $7,000. So that extends the payback period to just under 3 years. Still a pretty good payback period, in my opinion. But taking a step back, the biggest takeaway on all of these economic examples is that, even without subsidies, you can see that the economics of converting to electric fleets can be compelling. But let's talk about those federal subsidies that are available that can make these economics even more attractive. So the Inflation Reduction Act includes two main incentives for commercial clean vehicles. It includes first a tax credit for clean commercial vehicles of up to $40,000 for medium and heavy duty vehicles and $7,500 for other vehicles. And then second, it has a tax credit of up to 30% of the cost of installing the EV charging station or other clean vehicle refueling station in eligible census tracts, which I'll talk about in a minute. A big thing to note is that the Inflation Reduction Act made both of these tax credits available to tax-exempt entities through a provision called direct pay, where even though tax-exempt entities don't typically pay taxes, they can still take advantage of a tax credit and file with the IRS to get the tax credit in the form of a cash reimbursement. I'm going to talk go into a little bit of detail on both of these tax credits, but also want to give a note and a disclaimer that we're going to expect additional guidance from the IRA on these tax credits in the coming months, likely in January. Okay, so these are, I apologize for the wordiness, these are the relevant details for the commercial clean vehicle tax credit. Much of it is really here for your reference, but I want to highlight a few things. It's going to be available starting in January 1, 2023, and then for 10 years after that. And it can be used for both on-road vehicles and off-road vehicles, what the legislation calls mobile machinery. That refers to things like forklifts and tractors, construction vehicles, things like that. And it can be used for EVs, but also for fuel cell electric vehicles that run on hydrogen, and for plug-in hybrid electric vehicles that might have both an internal combustion engine that runs on another alternative fuel, or as well as electricity. But the plug-in hybrids, though, get a reduced credit amount. Let's see. It might it's also helpful to be aware that there's a separate non-commercial clean vehicle tax credit that's available for, you know, the everyday person that has several differences with this commercial one, including, you know, the fact that mobile machinery and plug-in hybrids are not considered eligible vehicles. And also a big difference is that with the commercial clean vehicle tax credit, there are no domestic content minimums or MSRP limits or income qualifications, which is probably going to make this tax credit a little bit more easily accessible than the non-commercial one. All right, so I want to talk about the federal tax credit for fueling infrastructure. And this tax credit, it's also available starting January 1, 2023, and for 10 years after that. And it includes eligible fueling equipment, not just EV chargers, but for refueling infrastructure for other types of alternative fuels as well. And this tax credit, it has two tiers, a lower tier that covers 6% of costs if prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements are not met, and then a higher tier of 30% of costs if prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements are met. In either case, the credit cannot exceed $100,000. Another big limitation on this tax credit is that it's only available to infrastructure built in eligible census tracts, which are either low income or not urban. And I've got two links on this slide that take you to mapping resources that can help you find out if your proposed refueling infrastructure is located in one of these eligible census tracts. And this is a snapshot from the low income resource that shows eligible low income census tracts in Clark County and in the Reno area, colored in red and yellow. So if you go to that website, you know, you can type in an address and see if it's located in one of these eligible census tracts. All right, so those are the federal tax credits. I want to shift a little bit now to talk about performance considerations for EVs. And you know, EVs, they can have a lot of performance benefits over their gas or diesel counterparts. I included a quote here from the transportation director that I spoke to of a school district in the Rockies who has had an electric school bus for a little over a year now. And she really just raves about some of the performance benefits of the EV. You know, it accelerates faster, which can help increase safety when you're driving on highways, entering highways, or maneuvering through traffic. They can perform better on inclines and handle better due to the lower center of gravity, particularly in icy conditions, which was a big consideration for this school district in the Rockies, the Colorado Rockies. But you know, of course, a significant performance consideration when buying an EV is how the range compares to the distance that the car drives on a typical route. And you can see in this chart on the right that you can see certain passenger EV ranges that automakers offer, and they vary quite a bit. You know, everywhere from 100 miles on a single charge to over 400 miles. As a general rule of thumb, all else being equal, an EV with a higher range battery is going to cost more than an EV with a lower range battery. It's also generally good to be aware, you know, if you're looking at automaker listed ranges on these cars, in practice, ranges may differ than what's advertised because of factors like elevation gain on the route, slight battery degradation over time, you know, how much you drive on the highway versus in the city, etc. All right, so let's talk about options for recharging your battery in between routes. You know, the cheapest option typically is going to be to install an EV charger and charge at your business's home base. That's also known as depot charging. However, there may be instances where depot charging is not possible because of infrastructure constraints at the depot or because your route length is greater than the range of the EV on a single charge. And in these instances, the electric vehicle can take advantage of over-the-road or public charging stations that are available. And there are tens of thousands of these charging stations in existence today across the US, and lots more are being built. And there are a variety of different websites and apps like PlugShare that you see a screenshot from here that can help you map out EV charging stations in the same way that you might map out a gas station. Some of these charging stations, they were built by automakers themselves, like Tesla, and others were built by third-party charging developers whose sole focus is just developing EV charging networks. And generally, it's good to be aware that different charging stations, depending on the charger installed, are going to recharge an EV faster than others. And I know Adam's going to talk more about EV charging infrastructure. All right, so a lot of what I talked about is conceptual. I think it's always helpful, though, to hear about real-world examples of actual businesses converting their fleets to electric. FedEx is a great example. They have a commitment to electrify its entire delivery fleet by 2040. And they took their first step in that direction earlier this summer when they received 150 electric delivery vans from General Motors subsidiary BrightDrop. Hertz too has a pretty aggressive goal of transitioning a quarter of its rental fleet to electric by the end of 2024. And they already have tens of thousands of EVs from automakers like Tesla, Polestar, and GM. And they recently announced a partnership with BP to install a national network of EV charging infrastructure at Hertz locations. If you live in Las Vegas, you might have seen some electric Amazon delivery vehicles driving around because they recently put some on the roads from Rivian, and they have a goal of converting another 100,000 of its delivery vans to electric. And of course, there are lots of examples in Nevada that we can point to, the least of which, the regional transportation commissions of Washoe County and of Southern Nevada. RTC Washoe, their entire fleet already operates on 100% alternative fuels, including 1/3 that is fully electric and the remainder that's plug-in hybrid. RTC of Southern Nevada also has a plan to transition its entire fleet to a combination of electric and hydrogen fuel cell by 2035, and they've already taken steps in that direction. And you might have seen more recently that Clark County School District, in addition to the 2 electric school buses they already have on order, they just last month received $10 million from the EPA to transition another 25 buses to electric. All right, I want to end by highlighting that there are several other clean energy opportunities for Nevada's businesses and organizations to take advantage of, including for building efficiency and electrification, for rooftop solar, battery energy storage backup. I've highlighted a few of the credits here for your reference, but I know I'm running short on time. So I just want to end by saying, there are lots of opportunities for going electric and realizing significant economic benefits and health and environmental benefits. And I and the Nevada Clean Energy Fund are here to help by providing technical assistance, and soon we'll be launching programs that provide financing assistance as well. So check out our website, follow us on Twitter, and don't hesitate to reach out to me directly with questions or to talk about potential projects.
Thank you, Kirsten, for that. Does anybody have any questions? We'll give a couple minutes for questions right now. Do you want to save them for later? All right, we'll have Adam come up next with his presentation from NV Energy.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And good morning, everyone. Just wanted to make sure everyone can see my screen. No? Yes?
Yes.
Appreciate the time. Thank you, Nicole. Great presentation, Kirsten. Really appreciate being able to add on to that discussion, talking about what we're doing here at NV Energy with regards to infrastructure for EV charging throughout the state of Nevada. Obviously, I am the director It says Director of Electrification and Energy Services for NV Energy. My role is to implement and operate all of our both EV programs, our demand side management programs, demand response, clean energy, a lot of those different programs. And my responsibility is the implementation and operations behind them. So building these charging stations that we are looking to put in the state is under my purview here at NV Energy. So we have, let me get the slides going here. We have two transportation electrification plans that are currently either in progress or that we have filed for. In the past, we did have an electric vehicle demonstration program, which has been fully subscribed. It was the ability for individuals and businesses to put charging stations throughout the state. We had a very successful partnership with the Nevada Governor's Office of Energy on the Nevada Electric Highway, which put charging stations every 50 plus miles, right around 50 miles, up the corridors of the state between Las Vegas and Reno, and then also up the eastern side of Nevada also. But we currently then, as I said, have two transportation electrification plans that we are moving forward with. The first one being the Economic Recovery Transportation Electrification Plan, which I know is a mouthful. So we call it ERTEP. It was filed in 2020, approved in 2021. We are in the process of operating and implementing this. Goals of ERTEP are economic recovery throughout the state, serving underserved communities, on commercial sites to make charging more accessible, and to expand the electric highway that we had started with the Governor's Office of Energy. The second plan is our transportation electrification plan, which also supports economic infrastructure through both commercial and residential sites, making charging more accessible across the state, both in-home and throughout several different corridors, either urban and I'll get into all of those as we go forward. So what I want to talk about first is ERTEP, our Economic Recovery Transportation Electrification Plan. So this was approved in 2020, began approved in 2021. We are currently in the process of moving forward through the implementation operations of this, and we are planning to invest nearly $100 million to expand electric vehicle charging station access throughout NV Energy service territory from 22 through 24. We really want to do this by strategically expanding charging station access, prioritizing placement in historically underserved communities, increasing access to clean energy job opportunities, and support EV driver tourism. The transportation sector, now accounts for the greatest percentage of greenhouse gas emissions in Nevada, as I think Kirsten also mentioned. And by accelerating adoption of EVs, ERTEP will also help our state attain its clean energy goals. We're going to be investing in job training, expanding the charging stations availability, and we have dedicated 40 million of the 100 million to funding to directly benefit the historically underserved communities. So what does it look like? It is 5 basic programs that we are currently implementing. The Interstate Corridor Charging Program, which is public charging along eligible interstate corridors to facilitate EV travel to and from the major metros, obviously between the north and south, and or out into the rural areas up in our northern territory. We have our urban charging, which is public charging at eligible downtown or commercial locations. That's basically throughout the metro areas, but we are really looking to expand and highlight the historically underserved communities to increase the infrastructure in those communities. Our public agency charging, electric vehicle charging program, which has strives to put charging at eligible community centers, universities, capitol complexes, government buildings, and then we have our transit, school bus, and school bus transportation electrification. So this will support transit electrification through electric school bus vehicle to grid trials, non-government fleet electrification. We are working specifically with the Clark County School District, with the Washoe County School District, and as you'll see when we go forward into the transportation plan that was just filed this year, that will expand to the other school districts throughout the state. And then our last one is outdoor recreation and tourism, which really looks at public charging and eligible tourist and outdoor recreation destinations along the corridors of the Strip and or the downtown in Reno, and then places like Red Rock or Tahoe. But I'll get into a little more details on all of them. So let's start with the interstate corridor. So this program, again, will increase charging infrastructure on interstate corridors to facilitate travel between Las Vegas and Reno and the tourist areas. Most drivers who are using this will seek to charge their vehicles as quickly as possible. So we will have a combination of DC fast at both 2 levels plus some level 2 chargers, which will also benefit the local EV drivers. And the selected sites will offer, as I said, multiple charger types, shaded canopies, large parking spaces to fit both light and medium duty vehicles. Again, we did do a lot of work on the Nevada Electric Highway, and that will continue. We will expand options up the corridors as we move forward with the interstate program for ERTEP. So our urban charging depots will provide electric vehicle charging in eligible downtown and commercial areas with emphasis on historically underserved communities. The program provides charging infrastructure in residential areas for visitors, residents, employees, transportation network employee companies, local fleet vehicles. In this scenario, there's a couple different ownership models. NV Energy can own the entire site, which would be 100% funded by NV Energy. We would take care of all the upfront maintenance costs. We would be responsible for future maintenance, but there's also customers can own where NV Energy will take care of many of the grid side and make ready costs, and we will reimburse an incentive potentially up to 100% of the cost of the chargers at a prorated rate that will get you 100% over the 5 years that we would require you participate in the program. But these programs, and this is kind of the case with all of the different models that we'll show. So urban charging, again, it will be very focused on the historically underserved community. That will be our first priority to increase the infrastructure in those communities, and then we will move outside those to complete the projects. So on our public charging, again, this is only under the economic recovery. I'll get into our larger transportation electrification plan here soon. Public agency charging serves public workplace and fleet in federal, state, and local government agencies. We will provide technical advisory services to help eligible site hosts determine where to install the charging stations in alignment with the best program site profile. Understanding that we would be 24/7 access with dusk to dawn lighting, nearby public amenities. This is a great opportunity is at the office of the government buildings and or community centers in certain areas where there's room to put a potential depot of 5 to 10 chargers. And then our tourism incentive, which is working with the local casinos and or tourist areas in the state, outdoor recreation, so Tahoe, Red Rock down here in the south, and then on the Strip, boosts economic value of the surrounding area. It has the advanced transportation electrification, reduce emissions, improves air quality, but it also gives an opportunity for the properties who we're going to work with to provide those services to their customers who may not be maybe traveling in from California and or Arizona, Utah, to charge their vehicles while on site enjoying what we have to offer. So that is really the transportation electrification plan, the ERTEP. That is again from 22 through 24. We're in the process of locating sites currently, working with many different places. We hope to have 1,000 charging stations throughout the state in the next 2 to 3 years. And that kind of will take us into our transportation electrification plan, which is the larger plan that we just filed with our Public Utilities Commission on September 1st. The plan was developed using objectives required by Senate Bill 448 to accelerate transportation electrification with support for all different customer classes. So as ERTEP was a commercial or business oriented focus, this full plan also has opportunities for single family homes, multi-unit dwellings, fleet, workplace. And this will continue over the next, but a very large investment. I want to say that this plan that we filed has not been approved yet by the commission. This is what we have put forth. There will probably be some tweaks and or opportunities for change in this, depending on what kind of order we get from our Public Utilities Commission. But this is the plan we put forward. This is not in play yet, but we hope this should be begun at some way that we were after the order comes out, let's say mid 2023 or second quarter of 2023. So we will have a residential charging incentive program, which will facilitate deployment of charging infrastructure in homes with additional financial support for income qualified customers. The incentive will look to be about 75% of the approved costs and 100% if income qualified up to about $12,000 something. We will then have an operations and maintenance incentive of up to $200 a year for the first 5 years. We will upgrade the panels in the home, and we will work with the whatever incentive the customer might get from the IRA to offset those costs. We're not going to double dip on them, but it will be reduced by those costs, and we'll work together. We're coming up with that plan currently. I saw a question pop up, and the answer is yes. Private companies can tap into the resources. They can be a part of the ERTEP program to put charging stations on their properties. Absolutely. So we will have a multi-family charging infrastructure program. This will facilitate infrastructure support charging for residents at multifamily properties. So what we've done is on this one, we have proposed to put 50% of the program budget reserved for multifamily residents in historically underserved communities for the first 3 months of the program launch. So based on census tract and or other opportunities that we can clarify that the locations are in these historically underserved communities, we will hold all funds for the first 3 months for those communities. And then we will then open it up after that. The cost for charging equipment will be the responsibility of the customer or NV Energy, depending on the ownership model. As I said, there's 2 different models, either NV Energy owned or customer owned. Customer ownership incentive for multifamily is up to $6,000 per level 2 charger and $8,000 in the historically underserved community, plus a maintenance and operations incentive for a couple years. We will be targeting multifamily property owners and managers, and obviously working in the historically underserved to provide sufficient access. We proposed a fleet charging infrastructure program to provide and facilitate deployment of charging infrastructure for government and non-government electric fleet vehicles. Cost for the charging equipment and O&M will be responsibility of the customer or NV Energy, depending on the ownership model, as I mentioned before. In this plan, it looks to be, we propose $6,000 per level 2 charger and $48,000 per DC fast. And then that goes up if you are in a historically underserved community, plus a maintenance and operations incentive for the first 5 years based on which type of charge you have. The target is the government and non-government customers with fleets. Then there's the non-government fleet, so just the fleet charging program, which will deploy charging infrastructure to support electric vehicle charging in office complexes, campuses, hospitals, and casinos. Cost for charging, again, very similar to ownership models, with an incentive per charger, as well as a operations and maintenance incentive for a significant time, 5 years after the installation. This is mostly for commercial customers, property owners, and then government entities and casinos. And then finally, a workplace charging infrastructure to facilitate deployment of charging infrastructure in electric vehicle charging for employees at workplaces, office complexes, campuses, government. So this is specifically for employees. This is not in public. This is not for public. Cost for charging equipment is very similar to what was proposed, 2 ownership models. And then commercial customer properties are the target and managed workplace. So again, our transportation electrification plan was filed in September. It's still being run through the commission in the regulatory process. But our economic recovery plan is open. We are working with potential sites, and we are still looking for more sites to install chargers, either NV Energy owned or customer owned, on the properties. And we're moving forward. Again, it was approved earlier this year or late last year. And we're moving forward working those potential locations. The last thing I want to talk about real quick is, Kirsten talked about it a little bit too, but we also, outside of electric vehicles, we have incentives for energy efficiency and opportunities for assistance to do projects at businesses to reduce cost, reduce energy expenses, reduce the carbon footprint, and we provide cash incentives. We offer application support, technical services, free education and training, instant discounts on some projects. So kind of what types of things are we talking about? We're talking about commercial equipment, exterior and interior lighting, cooling systems, and more. So anything that can be verified as an energy savings opportunity can garner an incentive from our program if it can be verified by the engineers who will come and check and kind of do some pre and post project analysis to verify that there were savings. It's a pretty easy process. You submit a pre-application. There's a pending pre-approval where we would then reserve your funds for 90 days. And there'd be constant check-ins back and forth as the project or your business is completing. Finish the final application once the process is done, and then do a little post inspection and cut you a check. So that's for saving all kinds of energy on a program that has saved over 1 billion kWh over the last 12 years here in Nevada. So really excited to continue that going forward. That is kind of all I've got. So I know we have some time for questions. So I saw a couple pop up, but I will stop sharing now. Good questions.
It looks like Sarah put a question in the chat. What about retailers? Are they considered in this plan for Adam?
Yes, retail. Yeah, all businesses are considered in the plan. Again, we have a focus on the historically underserved, but there obviously has to be location, and the site has to pan out to be a site that can be built on. So we are working with some of the local malls. We're working with some local retailers, working with actually some of the gas stations who are looking to convert some of their the property to electric charging. So we're working with as many as we can.
Somebody had their hand up. I think I might have lost who it was. You could just unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay. Hi, Adam. Thanks for your presentation. I was looking at the places you had listed under workplace charging infrastructure, and I saw that campuses were one of those areas that you're prioritizing.
Yes.
I was wondering if NV Energy plays a direct role in the location of the infrastructure the chargers on those campuses. I noticed that a lot on college campuses have been in like staff parking lots, which meant like students. It wasn't always available to students. So I was wondering if that was considered.
So it will be. Up until this year, we haven't really been involved. So as we move forward, yes, we will. So the opportunity for our ERTEP program is to make charging available for as many as possible. So on the campus, we will have, we plan to have, we're working with UNLV, UNR, Truckee Meadows, College of Southern Nevada. We're looking to put charging stations where it can be used by students, by faculty, by the public if needed. So it won't be in closed off areas that are only available to a select few. That is the plan.
There's another question from Justin in the chat. How will these plans and corresponding funding opportunities affect both residential and commercial electric rates?
They will be included in rates over a long period. But the one thing that we are really trying to put forward in these plans is we understand, as Kirsten not even alluded to, it made it very clear, and we understand that this electric vehicle revolution, if you will, is coming. It's happening. Car makers are building to those standards. It is a benefit to the state, it is a benefit to the country. So we want to really maintain the opportunity that we want to be out in front of this to understand and try to educate on the best ways to charge, the best ways to incorporate this in the day-to-day life, because charging overnight or having part of a demand response type program, if you will, where we have some managed charging opportunities to help alleviate some of these strain on the grid in the hottest times of the summer months. That is all part of what we're working towards. But yes, it's going to be included in rates, but over a longer period of time.
Lisa has her hand up.
Hi, Adam. Thanks for the presentation. I was just wondering, on your slides, looking at how to apply. I mean, is there a certain website to go to for the Business Energy Services for pre-application? What's the?
So yes, Business Energy Services. If you go to nvenergy.com/BES, all the information is there. It has the application. It's nvenergy.com/BES, Business Energy. BES as Business Energy Services.
Gotcha.
Or you can just go to nvenergy.com/PowerShift. That is our suite of all of our programs, our residential, commercial, schools, everything, and it'll have a tab for the business part. But the application, everything is there. If you want to put your information or shoot me an email, I'm happy to have someone reach out to you if you have something in mind.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Does anyone have any questions about the Inflation Reduction Act for Kirsten? No more questions?
I did too good of a job explaining it.
Yeah. Well, if there aren't any other questions, we'll just wrap it up. Again, thank you for joining us today for our first educational program for Clean Cities. Thank you to Kirsten and Adam for presenting. And if you have any questions, you can always email me, and I'll point you in the right direction to get you the information you're looking for. But thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.